Hi there. Now, one of the questions I often get asked online is about how to sheet the front leading edge of a wing. And when you look online, there are lots of images of people doing this in different ways. Some people use PVA, put lots of pins in it, others use CA, others have weights on sandbags. And I'm a great believer that there's no right and wrong way of doing this. At the end of the day, you develop your own style. If it works for you, you get good results, then that's brilliant. But what I thought I would do is a quick video just showing my approach to putting on the sheeting on the front of this wing's leading edge. Right, the first thing we need to do before we start sheeting is just take a sanding stick and just make sure we've got no high spots on the spars or the leading edge, nothing that's going to impede the smooth flow of the balsa. And the balsa that we're going to be using is this 1/16 sheet. It's probably on the softer side of medium, so it's nice and flexible and it will curve around that leading edge really well, and yet it's still got a little bit of strength to it. Now we're going to be using two different glues. We've got a pot of PVA here and we've got some thin CA. To put on the first sheet, which I'm going to do on the top side, the underside, sorry, this is the underside, I'm going to be putting it on just with thin CA, because at the end of the day we can get to all of the surfaces that need to be glued using the CA. But when we come to put on the second piece of sheeting, because of the shear webbing, we can't get in to glue this rib and this rib. We can still get in here to put some CA on, we can CA the ends. So what I'm going to be doing is putting PVA on that. You'll see that as we go. Now, when I put the sheeting on, because we're going to be putting cap strips on as well, so we're going to be putting cap strips on top of the ribs, I'm going to be putting the sheeting on but leaving about 1 millimetre, just a very small amount, hopefully you can see that, a very small amount of the spar showing, and that leaves us just a little bit of the shelf for the cap strip to sit on, and it just makes it a lot easier, it just makes it a lot more kind of easier to glue and rigid as well. If we haven't got that, then there's nothing for it to glue securely on other than the rib and the end, and it can just rock a little bit from side to side as we're trying to hold it and glue it. So for the first sheeting, and this is the underside, we've got this a flying wing with a pinch point. We've had to cut out a little bit of a step here to step in around that pinch point. And the first thing we're going to do is actually glue the sheeting onto the spar in the correct location so that we're leaving the correct amount of gap here for the cap strip to sit on. So we're just going to hook this a little bit under, which won't cause us a problem at all. And if I just turn this around a little bit, so hopefully that shows up, and I'll just move the camera slightly. Okay, so we're going to glue this sheeting on the top of the spar with that little bit of the spar showing for the cap strips, and I'm just going to put in a couple of pins, not very deeply into the balsa, but just to stop it from moving either backwards and forwards when we glue it. It isn't to hold it in place necessarily, it's just to stop it moving that way. And what we're going to do first is check this end is in position, which it is, and I'm just going to go along and glue with this with nice thin CA and glue along this top. So I'm just going to run the CA along, and at this point I'm just holding the sheeting parallel to the workbench, not trying to curve it around at all. Right, now we'll give that just a minute to make sure that it's gone off, and we'll take the pins out. Now I'm going to be working this around the ribs and then gluing it finally onto the leading edge. And to do that now, I'm going to turn this over, and you can see it's glued on the back here, and we're just going to curve that around and bring it onto that leading edge, and that's where we're going to glue it. And you can see that it's wrapping really nice and tightly around the ribs, and there's no reason it shouldn't do if we've got our wing the right shape. Now I'm going to start in the middle here because I want to make sure that let me just get a towel, I think, to rest this on, just to make it slightly easier and slightly more stable. There we go. Now I'm going to pull up the front of this and just glue it on there with some thin CA. Just going to do one spot at the moment, and I'm doing the centre of the wing. I find if I do it at the ends first, it ends up sometimes coming up with a little bit of a twist on it, which is what we definitely don't want. So I'm just going to CA along here. I mean, we could have cut the sheeting to size and then wrapped it on, but I would much rather leave it longer and glue it like this. And once we've got it on, we can go along and we can trim the sheeting. So we can see this is stuck on the front now. We can see it's nice and tight on that rib, so we'll give a little bit of CA just to hold that in place. And now I'm going to work this way, and we can see it's tight on those ribs. We'll pull up the sheeting and we'll just glue that along like that, and then we just need to hold this until the CA goes off. Now we've got that end of the wing done, we're just pulling up this end, and we can see it's a really nice fit along there. So we'll just run a little bit of CA along there and wait for that to set. And we'll move along this front edge. Right, we can see now that this is all stuck down. It's really nice and tight on the ribs, and it's around that front edge really well. And if we turn it over, we can see that sheeting is looking really nice. So what we need to do now is just trim that leading edge there. So we'll take a nice sharp scalpel and we'll just run it along that edge there. Right, well, I've got that cleaned up now. I've done the ends and I've sanded the leading edge there, and we can see we're ready now to put on the next piece of sheeting. And this piece of sheeting has gone on really nice, and it's gone on quickly as well, which is really good. So with the second piece of sheeting, we're going to do essentially the same procedure, but there's a slight variation on a theme. So what we're going to do is initially we're going to put this front piece on in exactly the same way as we did before, and we're just going to use a couple of pins to hold that leading edge in the correct place, so we have that little bit of a ledge ready for the cap strips to fit on. So we'll just get that pinned. There we go. So now I'm going to just run a little bit of CA along that edge. I just check this comes down nicely, which it does. So we'll run that CA along exactly the same as we did before. Right, we've got the second piece stuck on that spar and still loose along its length. You can see into the ribs. Now when we look from the back here, we can CA it along the inside of that rib there quite easily. We can get access, but we can't get access, as I said, to either of these two ribs because we've got the sheeting, we've got the shear webbing. So what we need to do is we need to put a little bit of PVA onto those ribs, just open this up and put the PVA in, and we'll do that now. And then we just curve the sheeting round, just alter this a little bit, and we'll just curve the sheeting round and then CA in place. And this will fit nicely if the wing is made well. It will sit on top of those ribs without any effort, without any weights or pins, because we've got the CA that's holding it in place along the front and at the ends on the ribs. So you can see we're just putting the PVA on those wing ribs there, just those two that we can't get to. There we go. So now, get rid of that. What we can do is we can turn the wing over, and we can pull this around, and we can glue this front leading edge first that we've just sanded off. And again, we're going to do that in the centre. You can see the PVA now has gone onto that balsa. So I just need to pull this around, and we make sure that we're pulling it nice and tight, pressing on those ribs as we come. And we'll do it in line with this first rib here that we've just put the PVA onto. And we'll just put some thin CA and hold that, and then we'll move to this rib here. So now we'll go on to the second rib that's got the PVA on it, and we'll just pull it round. We'll make sure you can feel that it's going tight on that rib. There's no gaps, so we'll just hold that in place and put the CA on it, and just wait for that to go off a little bit as well. Well, I've got all of that front stuck on now, and it's looking really good. And we can see that it's gone on lovely on the ribs here. There's not any gaps. And if we look in here, I haven't CA'd that rib in there. I don't know whether that shows up, but it's a really good fit before I CA'd it, just because of it's been wrapped around properly and the ring is a good shape. So I'm just going to run some CA around that now, and I can always run a little bit of CA in there. So what we've got to do now is just run the scalpel along in exactly the same way as we did with the other piece of sheeting, and cut that excess off the front. And this excess is exactly what we need for the cap strips. So we can use that to we can cut it into 3/8 strips and use cap strips. So it's not a wasted piece of balsa. Right, we've now got that leading edge sheeting on the top and the bottom on this side of the wing, and you can see hopefully how nicely that looks. It's gone on really well, and it's now secure. It took us just a few minutes really to do the process. We're not having to leave it overnight. As I say, this is just my approach. There's lots of ways of doing it, but I find this really quick, effective, and produces a lovely smooth result. And you can see I've sanded it up a little bit there. So now we'll just put a couple of cap strips on using that little bit of a shelf that we've left to make it easier for them to be stuck. Right, well, doing the cap strips now is a really straightforward process. What I like to do first is to just offer it up and not push it all the way to the sheeting, but put it so I can see where the centre is, and just put a little bit of a pencil line on the one side to line it up. And then I know I'm going to get my cap strip nice and central rather than off to one side. And we can also do that on the sheeting down here, just as light as possible, because we want to get rid of that before we do the covering. So now I just offer up the cap strip, and I push it down at the bottom here, and I just score a line with a scalpel, cut that, and there we go. And now hopefully that is the right size. There we go, and that fits, just slots in there quite nicely. So what I'm going to do is you can see now the benefit of that, just a tiny ledge there, it just makes it a lot more stable. So we're going to just push that in, make sure it's right, and we'll glue the ends first, just a dab of CA to run along. There we go, just wipe off the excess, and a little dab of CA down at this bottom end here. And just wipe off the excess again. And now I reckon this is probably just raised up a little bit, perhaps off the rib. So we'll just turn it over and we can see that is nice and central on there. And we're just going to hold that against the rib, hold the cap against the rib, the cap strip, and just run some CA down that joint. And we'll just hold that like that now. Okay, so now we have our cap strip on, and easy done, and you can see the benefits of having just that tiny little bit of a ledge, which we won't see when we come to do the covering, because it's set down at least, well, it's set down 1/16, isn't it, the thickness of the sheeting. Well, we've now got this end of the wing finished. The sheeting has gone on lovely, there's no lumps or bumps, it's just a really nice smooth curve. And the cap strips are looking good, we've got both sides done. And you know, I always absolutely love this stage of a build, because you go from what is essentially a kind of a wing skeleton to something that's looking a little bit more like the finished wing, and you can really get a feeling of what it's going to be like. And like I say, I always find this part of a build really exciting. As I said, this is my own personal approach to putting on this this sheeting. I know some people would prefer to use PVA, some people CA, but you know, a mixture like this to cope with the situation, I think, is a really good solution. So anyway, I hope you found it interesting and useful, and thanks very much for watching.